Welcome, everyone. I'm so thrilled that we have so many on the call today, especially with how distracting the world is right now.
Yes.
I'm just going to pull up just some slides to keep us on track. Just one moment. Thank you all for joining. Take a moment also, put in the chat. We'll be using the chat a lot today. Put in the chat where you're from. Share your LinkedIn profile if you wanted to connect. I feel like we're lacking networking opportunities in our world right now. So take a moment to introduce yourself. Let us know where you're dialing in from, and we'll get started. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. You are here for a webinar learn all about how inclusion is our superpower, how you can use diversity, equity, and inclusion to build better products and teams in tech. Just so you know who we are, my name is Dr. Victoria Mattingly. I am CEO and founder of Mattingly Solutions. We are a woman-owned consulting firm based here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, specializing in diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI. We do strategy consulting. We help companies measure and develop inclusive workplace behaviors, and we also specialize in allyship training. I'll kick it over to Damola.
Yes, and my name is Damola Idowu. I am CEO and co-founder actually with my son, Wale Idowu of Toyz Electronics. We are a startup on the campus of Carnegie Mellon at the Schwartz Center of Entrepreneurship. What we focus on is bringing innovation to learning, technology, and using that to inspire and bring in more diverse people into the tech fields. So we actually do something called Toys Makers. It's like our product, and Toy Steam is our platform, and we use a variety of things like these tools that we're going to share here today to help people be able to build and get their superpowers. I'm an innovator, an author, journalist, songwriter, musician, engineer. You can see the screen, so I'm multi-talented. And I bring creativity, technology, entrepreneurship over the past 25 years of experience and utilize that. In addition to having spoken to several C-suite executives in tech, business, and a lot of fields to kind of synthesize a new view of how people could be more inclusive.
Thank you for that. And yeah, Damola and I just started working together just over the last couple months, and we see just such a great opportunity to disrupt the DEI space, bring more creativity and innovation to this work. So we're going to talk about just that. So just to level set what we'll be discussing, just share a quick definition of what we mean by DE&I, and then really get into DEI as a superpower, especially in the tech space. And also, what does it mean to leverage creative storytelling to advance DEI? And then we're going to share our superheroes with you, which was just a very fun exercise that it's all new to me. I come from a very strong science background, so to approach DEI in this superhero realm is pretty exciting. And then finally, talking a little bit about an opportunity to bring inclusion superpowers to your company using creative storytelling. So to get started, as I mentioned, we're going to be using that chat box today. So I'd like everyone to take a moment and think about what is one characteristic about yourself that when people see it or know it about you, they treat you differently, or you think they might be treating you differently. And I'll get us started off and share in the chat about myself. Just one characteristic about who you are, that when people find out about you, they treat you differently. Oh, yeah, Crystal and I had the same one, being mamas. Believe it or not, you can be a mama and still, prioritize your career, still want to move up in a company and be a mom. It's possible to do both. Queer, thank you for sharing that, Erica. White, yeah, our racial ethnicity, who we love, what we do, military. Yeah, keep putting those adjectives in there. Engineer, yeah, people have all these,
I love it. I love it.
Cool, national.
Yes.
Yeah, keep those coming. Keep those coming. And where am I going with this? Where are we going with this? Okay, so Diversity inclusion, it's a huge topic right now. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and I feel like it's just being thrown out there. What do we actually mean by these terms? And I really try to boil it down to diversity is how we see each other, and inclusion is how we treat each other. So when it comes to these characteristics of who we are, you know, when we flip that around, whenever we hear words like mother, queer, engineer, white, black, dual ethnicity, whatever these things are, it's how we quickly make assumptions about how we see each other in the world and how others see us. And then that then results in how we, whether intentionally and it's most likely unintentionally, treat one another. So diversity and inclusion, really getting down to its bare taxes, is how we see each other and how we treat each other. And there's a lot of opportunity to treat each other better, having this awareness of how we see the world affects our behaviors. And then finally, one last term to define for us today, the difference between equality and equity. So equity are the practices and the systems in place that lead to fair outcomes happening. And I love this picture, and this is a great little preliminary example of how we can use storytelling to bring to life. But on the left-hand side, you see this is what equality looks like. And what it's getting at is everyone's getting the same resources, but it's not leading to the same outcome. It's not taking into the account that we might not all have that same baseline height to be able to see the baseball game in this example. And so equity is taking those differences that we have into account when building the structures and resources that we provide to our teams. If you run a company, you know, the resources you just allocate at your organization, or even just, you know, the opportunities for equity in our everyday life. So just 3 quick terms I wanted to define for you all. And then share some stats on the ROI of DEI as well. And this is getting into, you know, how DEI can be a superpower on your team. So this comes straight from, you know, valid academic research, but teams that have more gender diversity lead, and this is companies, actually, companies that have more gender diversity tend to produce 25% higher profitability than their competitors with less gender diversity. And then same goes for ethnic diversity, 36% higher profitability for companies that are more ethnically diverse compared to their competitors. Diverse teams are 19% more innovative. And one study of GitHub programmers found that they compared 2-person teams, so one-on-one teams, and those 2-person teams that had not worked together previously yielded about 8 times better performance than teams that had already worked together. So why is this happening? Well, it turns out that diversity leads to a better exchange of information, so better communication. Exactly. You don't assume, oh, this person's different than me. I don't know them. I'm working with them for the first time. You know, I don't relate to them, so I'm going to make sure to over communicate. That is a consequence of diversity, and also diversity leads to better decision making. So you know, we get, whenever we're used to these homogenous teams, we fall victim to groupthink, just assuming, well, if this person says it's right, then I'm just going to assume it's right. No, diverse teams lead us to make better decisions and not fall into those traps of groupthink that happen.
And let me chime in on something there, right? Because what is interesting is that what technology, and this is how to build diverse teams in tech. Now, in the tech field, you're dealing with a population that's millennials and Gen Z, right? Preliminarily. So you're dealing with people 18 through 39. So, you know, senior engineers, late 20s, early 30s generally. And cultural relevance is social media. But what social media has done, the advent of Twitter, the advent of TikTok, the advent of Facebook, what you have is people are able to segment into their silos based along their interests, right? So we used to have a loneliness of, well, I'm different, but I don't fit in. And now you can find like people anywhere in the world where you fit in, but it makes you constrict your view because you're not able to see the whole world and how beautiful it is. Like, look at all these different characteristics. It's like 24 of us on this chat, and look at all the different backgrounds. Just take a look. Like, this is a conversation crossing sex, race, gender, ethnicity, right? Career background, talent, all these things. And what you're, even look at it, location, right? And this is turning communication and technology and showing people how we could include everybody around this idea of inclusion. We're having a conversation with a wide representation of who we are as a nation, as a world. And these are like the foundations of everybody has a story, and everybody's story is told here.
Yes.
Because yes, go ahead.
Yeah, and then just to chime in, it's just, right now, and as I said a moment ago, thank you all for joining us today, because I know we're all super distracted about who our next president's going to be. And even just that conversation, we have, boiled our whole country and our whole political view down to red and blue. And we were so much more than that. We were so much more complicated, like diverse, complex individuals, even just the 24 people on this call, the, 350 million in the country. And there's so much more than just boiling this down. I feel like DEI really brings that, especially storytelling in DEI gets back to that, human element that we're not single issue individuals, and I feel like it just really highlights that beauty of the creativity that Damola was talking about. And we want to hear from you all as well.
Yeah.
So let's take a moment, and I really want everyone to think about how has DEI, how has diversity, equity, inclusion enhanced your products or your teams? And, feel free to write in the chat. There's also a feature, you can raise your hand if you want to get off mute and share a story, but we want to hear from you all about how, just a couple examples of how DEI has enhanced your teams, your products, your company. We want to hear from you.
Yes. And I mean, this is awesome. This is awesome. Please, somebody share.
We have lots of stories to share as well. So.
Oh, of course. But you know what? One thing I will add is when you start looking at it and looking at the point of everybody's a human being, right? We're 99.9% similar. And Bill Nye, like what I wrote in the song and what Bill Nye did in a TikTok was show that our skin color and our pigmentation is all about ultraviolet light and where we were ethnically, geographically, right? But underneath, we're all human beings, right? And you could interchange our organs, right? If God forbid anything happened to any of us and we're in the hospital, they're not saying, oh, this is a black person, I can't give you a white kidney. No, we're the same species. All that happens is that what our experiences are, that's our socialization, and then the way we were nurtured, the way we were raised, gives us deviation. But if we utilize that in the opposite and saying, what if that's a different perspective? Like I'm really struggling with this villain, and I don't want to kind of peek it, but I'm really struggling with this challenge, and I don't know what to do. Well, maybe somebody might have a different perspective at it, and that might help me. Okay, so somebody put something in there. Did you see that, Victoria? And Crystal's talking about healthcare.
Yeah, ensuring that representative care teams are in place to have a positive impact on better care delivery and patient experience. I love that example so much, especially we know that racial inequity exists in the healthcare field. For example, Black women in this country are, I think it's 8 times more likely to die during childbirth. And so making sure that, you have that representation, you have, doctors and nurses and healthcare providers that look like you to have this conversation and bring those inequities to life, and you can get better care results whenever you have representation that represents the clients that you're serving. I love that example. Multiple viewpoints, providing a balanced view of the market, making sure that you understand your client base, your customer base. I think that's really crucial as well. And then Damola, I would love you to share the story about the song that, for those of you that were a few minutes early, the song that was playing, and I just shared the link in the chat with you all, but tell us about the impact of diversity on that beautiful song that we heard and that story and that experience.
So I'll share a little story. I'll try to make it succinct. Some of you know me, I go long-winded, but in the mid 90s, since like 1995, right, I created a genre called superhero rap. So I created a character called the Great Deity Don. We're going to get into that later when we start talking about superheroes. But I had a concept of superhero rap is like idealism. What is this higher good you strive for, right? Then there's science fiction, right? Because I have a mechanical engineering background. I studied mechanical engineering, and I'm using science fiction in my mindset to think of powers. And then the obstacles are your villains. So my son graduated high school early at 15, and he's my co-founder. And he's on campus at Carnegie Mellon. There's not many African Americans studying engineering. Let's be honest about it, right? He was like, and some of his roommates had challenges and didn't finish. So we created a wraparound experience from his student startup. And we did hackathons. But in the hackathons, we weren't like, we're only going to invite engineering students or coders. We wanted everybody on campus to be involved. So we involved people in Dietrich. We involved people in the arts. We had behavioral scientists. We had engineers. We had artists. We had musicians. We had drama majors. We had game developers. We had all sorts of people. And then he was Intel Hack Harassment Ambassador. That was a campaign they were doing about a few years ago. So for Hack Harassment, we were going to do a hackathon, and we invited Intel, we had Google, we had Autodesk, we had EA, we had Def Jam Records. So you're looking at, okay, you're going to talk about harassment, you're going to bring coders, and you're going to bring this wide mosaic, not only of people of different backgrounds, even locations. So students came from different campuses. We have people coming from Virginia, people coming from Ohio, people local, Pitt, Carnegie Mellon, and a wide range of people coming together, right? I partnered with the music department for this song, and we were going to do a hackathon. Now, in my 90s era, I was known for being the freestyle master. So I would go to jazz clubs, get on the mic and freestyle, improvisate, so you can hear how I say, what I say. I don't hate. Just off the top of the head doing that. And I'm like, you know what? Why don't we do an album in a weekend? And it's like an album in a weekend. These kids aren't hip hop artists. And I'm like, don't worry. We're going to basically create a jam session. I would write with them and we would create it. So what happened was we had a mosaic of 40 students working with Richard Schultz at the music department. He had a class of 40 students collaborate with us, different races, gender, ethnicity, sexuality, all of everybody coming together. And they're classically trained musicians. And my approach, how to make in hip hop jazz fusion. There was a young woman, Abby Adams, who was playing the violin. And they were like, well, she could sing. And I wrote her something. And basically we had this idea, how do you talk about tech, inclusion, because it's like stop the harassment. And why should you stop the harassment? Because we're all the same. And that kind of dovetails to this conversation. So that's the story of how the song came together. And she sang it magnificently. So she got on her violin, and I know you're a musician too, Taylor. So she got on her violin and we sat down tracks, and then we worked together and she sang, and then we put it together, and it's like a beautiful record. And then the cool story of it is we created an action figure USB from this. And then because my music has reached over 30 countries across 6 continents, I then went to 5 continents and 15 countries with the vinyl record. And you can see the artwork, right? When you look into my artwork in my background, and took it to those countries, and I presented a copy of the vinyl to the brand director of Techniques in Osaka, Japan. Why is that important? Techniques turntables were Kool Herc used to create hip hop. So I took the work of these diverse students, and then I talked about it too. So there's audio of me telling her, here's how we're creatively using technology to collaborate. Just like your piece of technology you created in Japan started a culture in the Bronx, New York, and it's gone all over the world. So In a nutshell,
I love
that's the story of Stop the Bullying. And Wally's on the call too. My co-founder's on the call too. So
I love it. I love it. Yeah. So once again, that link is in the chat, and that was the song that was playing as y'all were entering the Zoom meeting. But just there's so many elements of like capitalizing on DEI that I love for that. So first off, the speed of which that song was created over a weekend, like using a hackathon, but being really intentional about bringing in that level of diversity from the get-go. And then the fact that, talking about creative storytelling, the creative aspect, the creative arts, and how that really brings us together. It transcends nationality. It transcends, where we are, who we are. I've never, please let me know if anyone on this call does not like music. I've never met someone who said, I don't like music. Like it's a way for us to all, get on the same page and, not only create something together, but enjoy something together, understand and experience better together. And, when it comes to, I shared those stats before. I feel like if you're on the call today, you're somewhat sold on the fact that DEI does result in better teams and better organizations. And so the next question is, well, how do we build it? How do we foster it? And, there's a lot of research that shows that these corporate DEI trainings, especially when it's just a one-off and it's not coupled with any sort of broader initiative or strategy or approach, do not lead to more diverse, equitable, and inclusive organizations or teams. And so what can? Well, it's whenever we have training coupled with actually forming relationships, actually, building something together, having that shared vision, those shared goals. And so we want to talk a little bit more about the creative process and using storytelling specifically to build more diverse, equitable, and inclusive teams. So,
and I'll add on to that too, right?
Do.
Because when we're talking about using storytelling to do it, now that story I told you, this record was created in 2017. Right before my son graduated, right? Now, Abby was able to use that song. That song exposed her to Beijing. Because that song exposed her to Beijing, she was able to utilize the fact that she's on a record in Beijing to get into a very tough music conservatorship for her master's in music in London. So that story of a weekend in Pittsburgh, went to Osaka, Japan, went to Beijing, China, got her to get an advanced degree in England, right? And that is telling, so the storytelling allows creativity and allows your products to reach other markets. So the experience of learning on campus in Pittsburgh now became a global enriching experience that took her out of Pittsburgh all the way overseas. Just to add how diversity and how when you include so much, it's able to resonate way beyond your eyes could see.
I love that. I love that. All right. So with creative media bringing us together. So Damola mentioned before about how, with what we're seeing in social media and TikTok and online, it can be very divisive, but can also bring us together as well. And so how we can use music or use team building exercises, creative processes to actually bring us together across differences. And there's this Heineken commercial, and I don't even drink Heineken, so this is not an endorsement of Heineken by any means.
No.
Beautiful Heineken commercial where they bring two people together who share very different ideologies, very different perspectives, and they have them build some piece of IKEA furniture, right? But they go through that process of working together, physically building something together, and then at the end, it's revealed that, someone who is anti-trans, it's revealed that the person they just spent the last 2 hours building this piece of furniture with is a trans individual. And so it's almost like this reveal, and then they get asked, no pressure, but would you sit down and have a beer and just have a real conversation with this person? And all the groups in this video, in this commercial, ended up agreeing and having that conversation. And I think we get into these silos and believing like, oh, this is my ideology, this is who I think I am, and I see you in certain ways, so I'm just going to have all these beliefs about who you are, and then we don't actually have that conversation across difference. And we can use the creative process to build those bridges and have those conversations and make those connections in a way that a sheer diversity training or just, you know, reading an article or staying in our echo chambers on social media just doesn't foster that level of DEI. Before we get into storytelling, Damola, would you mind sharing the Volkswagen story? I just thought that
Yeah. So, and just to piggyback on that before I share that, is that technology allows us to connect with people. That's the cult. And then within cultural relevance, what trends on technology are culturally relevant things. Now, what we're doing and what I spoke about is taking a cultural relevant objective, which is anti-bullying, right? Creating a product out of it. This product being commercialized, this product now going global, and now this product being able to impact the collaborators in a way where not only does that product open up opportunities in places you don't see. So think of your company. Now, the wider you bring ideas in, now the wider you could generate revenue for your company and for other ideas, right? Not only does it do that, because that's going to dovetail into the Volkswagen story. Not only does it do that, we're now able to take something from my co-founder's experience on campus to see in other places this could be relevant. And now this thing we created is organic, right? So we're doing NSF research, we're doing customer discovery. And one thing about it is that some of your companies in tech might have a global marketplace. So I was talking to a recruiter, a tech recruiter from Volkswagen, and they have a huge thing. Locally, you know, there's Argo AI and there's autonomous vehicles, and being able to do autonomous driving is huge. And underneath that is AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, right? But underneath machine learning is what are the algorithms? How do you determine that if a car is going to crash, it's unavoidable? Do you hit that woman with a stroller or do you run into the median, right? What choice is more valuable? And with Volkswagen, they are now building their own software team globally. They're going to be in China. They're going to be in America. They're going to be in Canada. They're going to be in Latin America. They're in Europe. They're in Israel. They're in India. They're building thousands of engineers because they're going to build their own architecture. Volkswagen is either number one or number two globally annually. They sell over like 10 to 11 million vehicles at a minimum worldwide. And for them, they need to build a global team to build the architecture and then also understand how locally, by having diverse engineers, they could be able to customize the software to the preferences. Because think about your driving experience, right? You plug your mobile device on and you have Android Auto or whatever, or CarPlay, and where you're going now is synced, right? So now you're basically in a robot. Your car is a robot now, and you're speaking to your car. Now, what got me into engineering was that dream. Like, I wanted to become a mechanical engineer because I watched Knight Rider in 1982. I even made like a model kit for Knight Rider, right? Like, I was Knight Ridered out, wanted to become a mechanical engineer because I wanted a car that could drive itself, and I wanted a kit. I wanted an AI that I could talk to, and that AI that could be my friend and it could collaborate. So that got me into this vision. Now, it's not till now, right, where you're seeing that you're going to have AI and you're going to have cars that could drive themselves and be autonomous. But then how do you create the culture, the experience? So it was very interesting to me that a company like Volkswagen is going to be hiring thousands of engineers over the next 5 years, all over the world, but they're going to be working out of the same bucket. So the software they're going to work on is going to be integrated. So think of how diverse it is. And then he told me, and how they're looking for their teams he was thinking of, so there was somebody in mining, and he was like, wow, there's some things in mining in optical technology that's relative to machine learning and relative to sensors there in autonomous vehicles. Then there are people that want to hire people from gaming, right? Because there are things in gaming and object-oriented programming that it's relative to software engineering. So it's like breaking the mold of who could design their product is going to generate billions of dollars for them. And it's going to make products that are going to be in individual markets that will be tailored. So it just widens how people will be able to attach. And if they're like me, I had a dream of being connected to an AI like Kit. So it's like it brings this tech aspect and this creativity and how you're designing things and building algorithms, because you have all these different perspectives collaborating with the mission of building a software product that will be in millions of vehicles.
And all of that going back to that initial story, right? And like it's as short as an autonomous vehicle is driving down the street, and how does it decide whether it hits, I forget what it was.
But like a median, would you want to hit the median like the light post, or would you want to hit the car? Because the light post is fixed. Mm-hmm. Oh, it might be more damage. So is the insurance algorithm saying, oh, well, this is their zip code, so maybe that person, or where's the value, right? Who's building the algorithm and the value?
Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, like DEI and storytelling as its vehicle, DEI brings humanity back into the tech space. And we have things like algorithms and AI and these decisions being made that we don't have that human behind the scenes, and especially groups of humans who are diverse that can represent like the multiple perspectives of who these products will be serving. Like that brings the humanity back into this work, and using that storytelling and starting with the story to have that alignment, to have that vision, to have these examples to look out for as we continue building this technology is just so paramount. And so I did want to talk a little bit about storytelling specifically for the purpose of advancing DEI. And in my work as a DEI practitioner, I'm always pushing the companies I work with and the DEI task force and councils and leaders to collect the stories, because the stories that you hear from the people who can benefit from DEI initiatives, from the teams that are creating better products, being more productive, it's those stories that are going to get your senior leaders to care, that's going to get more investment into doing work in this space and ensure that DEI is a crucial part of your overall company strategy. I always say, as long as there's people in an organization, you need DEI strategy in that organization. So how does storytelling work to advance DEI? So the first way is leveraging those stories from the bottom up to really bring insight and awareness to the differential experiences that different groups face at organizations, particularly minority groups. I'm working with a engineering and energy firm right now, and their senior leaders, they're very homogenous group of older white men, and they're not getting why this DEI stuff matters. And we've killed them with stats, we have all the research. It's still not ringing true, but what we do see that works whenever we can get anonymous stories from their women working at this company, from their Black workers, from their minority populations, and say the people are experiencing this company culture differently. We are losing employees, and here's what they said in their exit interviews. It helps people understand the importance and urgency of these DEI issues, so we can start actually trying to solve them. So that's the first way. And the second way is from the bottom up, also top down for storytelling. So I know when I was doing some consulting work with Microsoft, they were really interested in how can we help our leaders become better storytellers to talk about their own DEI journey, their own awareness building, of their own aha moments of when I realized, this DEI stuff really matters and we're going to be a better company because of it. Help them be those storytellers, be those allies. Acknowledge, a lot of DEI work is just getting comfortable with the uncomfortable and acknowledging, having these tough conversations. And it's a lot easier to have a conversation if you're telling a story as opposed to just facts and figures and just kind of throwing bullet points out there. So,
and then even with stories too,
mm-hmm.
It allows everybody has a story. It's like, well, how did you get here today? right? So if I said, well, how was your day? Right? Or what happened today? That's a story. And we all create our stories. We add on to our stories daily, right? And it's like, oh, once we start telling our stories, then we might find similarities in each other. Oh, you know what? I drive that way too. Wow, that traffic. Or you might be like, oh, you were getting there? Oh, you know what? So here's how I avoid that traffic, right? So when we start sharing stories, we can find commonalities in each other.
Yes. And that did Damola. Like that's the linchpin right there. Like that is what's bringing this all together. It's when it comes to DEI, going back to that first exercise we did at the beginning of the call, you know, whenever people see these things about us, it's not only like, oh, you're a mother and you're white and you're older or younger or whatever the thing is.
Or you're black, or you know what I mean, or you're gay, or whatever.
Whatever it is, it immediately go to us versus them. Am I in this group or am I not in this group? And that's just, we can't help that. That's just how our brains work as humans. We have to make these quick judgments calls. We have to be constantly organizing all the information that we're inundated with at every single moment into quick categories, right? And so what storytelling does is it removes that us versus them mentality that we automatically go into, because we're able to relate and we're able to understand and connect using things like connection and empathy and all these outcomes of storytelling. And the empathy piece, so I wanted to share 3 quick pointers on how you can build empathy through your storytelling. So the first is eliminating unnecessary facts and figures. You know, data has its purpose and it has its place, but whenever you're telling a good story, really keep it down to the most crucial characters, the most crucial pivotal moments, and take away all those unnecessary points and facts and figures. The second way you can really build empathy using storytelling, using sensory details and images, create that picture. And I think when we'll get to the superhero part, that will really come
exactly.
And then finally, jokes and metaphors. So storytelling is fun, even though we can talk about heavy concepts. And, you know, whenever we do have those emotional moments, and that Heineken video really, I think, touches upon that. There, to get a little neuroscience in there, oxytocin is released whenever we have these emotional moments in storytelling. And that is sometimes deemed the moral molecule, right? And I feel like there's a narrative right now in the DEI space with, okay, we need to start abandoning this business case, because the business case is there, the research is there. I showed you the stats earlier. It's still not the right reason, though, to really invest in DEI. The right reason is it's just the right thing to do. It's good for humanity. It's good for the people working at our companies. And so to be able to have that oxytocin release by having the emotional element of stories, that's going to make people lean into that moral argument a little more authentically. But you know, keeping things light, to having jokes, having metaphors, that's what people remember, because that elicits that same emotional reaction. It doesn't always have to be heavy and dark. It can be light, and then the metaphors, if people remember those, it really capitalizes on your memory as well. But let's get into superheroes, Damola. I feel like
yes.
Marketed this thing. Let's talk about superheroes. So you started talking a little bit about this with the song and the anti-bullying and the superhero rap, but can you share more about how you've used superheroes and the creation of superheroes particularly to help promote DEI concepts?
Okay, so I would actually give people a DEI example of superhero rap. So creating product out of inner city DC, Ward 8, raising your child, then having that product go around globally. So the elements of superhero rap already had, I feel like we all have a vibration. We all have like a rhythm of who we are. So it's like in a song, I'm like, there's a paradise I wish, so we could see each other with inner sight, no need to racially fight. Right? Because you're seeing people off their auras. It's like, I just vibe with you, right? Like, we just vibe, right? It's like you get a good vibe, right? Now, that's a power. Because for me, superhero rap, Deity Dow was a mentalist. It was like, I was thinking, like, if Iron Man was to rap, what would he sound like? So I was like, my micromic wave functions, measurements on the modulator, in signs, turns to flat lines, echoing chimes, evaps my mind. And I'm putting these things there. And I'm like, Penetrated souls, I choose to battle superheroes, overthrowing past regimes because the rulers had no ethos, right? So you're talking about, now you're talking psychological concepts. These are like powers I had, right? And I was utilizing this in songs, but this became a mentality. So when I land in China and I'm in Hong Kong, and it's like 30 million people, that's like being in New York, New Jersey simultaneously, right? And it's like this massive city and you don't speak Mandarin. So I had to become my superhero self, right? I had to aspire to be my higher self. How do you interact with people? So I had to now get to my inner light. So I'm communicating with people with my vibe. I'm like, I feel uncomfortable, but I'm comfortable because I'm just going to radiate who I am. And my superpower of radiating positivity will win me favor. And so it's like, well, people will be like, well, I'll be the only black person in the room. I'm like, imagine being the only black person around 1 million people plus, and you're packed in to a train like this, and you don't even speak their language. So it's like that superpower gave me the assertiveness, the confidence to interact with people. Same thing in Tokyo. Like you go to Tokyo and it's like 20 million plus, and you're looking at it and it's like, oh my freaking God, I don't speak Japanese, but you just feel like your aura and your energy, right? So this character, the great deity Da, he's a mentalist, right? He fights cerebral warfare. He uses electromagnetic fields. So the album we did is called The Chronicles of the Electromagnetic Field General. And I look at my energy, right, as electromagnetic fields. What energy are you emanating out of yourself? So I feel like if you control the energy that you emanating out of yourself, that's a field general, like the highest military level. Like you go on to war because it's like a war against negativity.
Yes. Oh, wait, can I jump in real quick?
No, please do. Please do.
So when it comes to really understanding like what inclusion is, right? And so there's so many, I say diversity is how we see each other, inclusion is how we treat each other. I'm sure many of you have heard the whole diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. But something that is also like a pretty big way of understanding inclusion in the DEI space is inclusion is about authenticity and making people feel like they can bring their authentic selves to work every day. So what does that mean? So I've heard the phrase, oh, bring your whole self to work every day. I don't like that. I feel like we should choose the person we want to show up to work every day. There should be professionalism in there. We don't need to bring our whole selves. What I do like is bringing your best self to work every day. And there are aspects of who we are that maybe don't fit into the mold of what culture fit is here or what has been awarded in the past. But there are aspects of who we are that allow us to bring our best selves to work every day. And what you're talking about, Damola, like the energy and having that confidence and being able to been recognizing these are my strengths as an individual. And so not only am I going to talk about them in a job interview, but I'm going to bring them to work every day because I'm in an environment where I'm being rewarded for being my best self and bringing that person to work every day. And I love how you used the creation of the superhero to actually operationalize this concept of authenticity, which I feel like is, this golden ticket to inclusion that companies are just so desperately trying to actualize. And I love that so much. And let me pull up our superheroes because I'm aware of time and I want to make sure we get those. So let me pull those up so we can share those with everyone.
Yes.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great.
Okay. So for me, I kind of spoke about my superhero. So the great deity Da, and then, I have my own comic book and Chronicles of the Electromagnetic Field General, the Carnegie Mellon sessions, and going around the world. Actually, a cool story about my superhero. So vibrating like that and it's actually part of what we do in the Toyz team. We were able to now integrate global cultural experiences for students through a virtual reality game my co-founder, my son, developed. But there's a cool story of the DEI. So I get to South Korea, and some fans hear about me on social media, and they contact me, and they were like, well, can you come to our city? And I'm like, where is your city? I'm in Seoul. They were like, no, we're in Samcheok. I'm like, where's Samcheok? And they were like, no, this by the beach. I'm like, there's beaches in South Korea? It was like, you know, we're messaging each other, right? So there's like language translation. So they're like, come on by. Now, I meet this artist, his wife, his daughter, and then he had some friends. And his friends collaborated with me, and then that became the Global Alliance. So then I wound up building a global, diverse team. He was like, I don't speak English. I only rap in Korean. But he could rap along with the songs I created. So, but he was like, I have a producer. Can you rap along with him in English? So we wound up creating a global alliance where I had a rapper in Chinese, a rapper in Korean, a rapper in Spanish from Colombia, a DJ that speaks French from Belgium, and obviously I'm speaking English. So we had like 4 or 5 different languages in the same project from this superhero character that vibrates and brings aura and energy, right? And is able to land it through his energy, communicate to people of different backgrounds in different countries. And that wound up leading to, when that project got out recently, an artist in Japan came to me. So now I have a song with an artist in Japan. So he's rapping in Japanese, I'm rapping in English. Just imagine that. But that's like global, virtual collaboration, superhero rap. My idealism is to bring people together. Like that's my highest good.
And I
my
love
highest good is how do you bring people together?
And those skills that are necessary to develop and refine and leverage to be able to create across those geographic divides and time zone and language barrier, like those skills are absolutely transferable to work in tech especially, but any industry where you have team-based work going on. And I feel like that's a big like aha that I had whenever you and I started working at Damola. Was like these skills are the exact type of skills that we're trying to develop and foster in DEI trainings that are just not taking hold because we don't have something to be building. This DEI, you know, abstract thing, we can't build that. What we can build is music. What we can build are these creative outlets, podcasts, and we'll talk about that in a moment. One quick question before I get into my superhero: who is the villain?
Well, see, the villains, there's like a multitude of villains you come across, right? Like my fear of what will happen to me if I go to this country where I've never been, that became a villain because that was an obstacle, right? So I was like, I'm going to be a foreigner. I'm an American. Are they going to like me? Are they going to hate me? And now being a mentalist, that villain was overtaking me sometimes. Then when I talk to people, then it's gaslighting me, right? So now the villain's grown bigger. And then now I had to take it down a notch and say, well, if you master your electromagnetic fields and you generate the right vibration, it's sort of like people like, what? Be careful of a dog. If you act like you're unfair, the dog will come and bite you. It's like, no, just be calm so that your energy doesn't trigger people to feel uncomfortable about you. So the villain was my own fears, my own thoughts, my own assumptions of an unknown experience because I did not know what I was going into. And that it ties into DEI because we have our own assumptions based on our experience. And I'm having an experience and I'm going to be around literally millions of people, tens of millions of people where there's none of what I'm used to. So how do you get the courage to go into an environment that's totally new? And that was the villain. Like that obstacle was so villainous to me and I had to conquer it.
I feel like a lot of us, especially where, you know, the necessity for DEI, it comes from the fear of difference, right? Where it's not that we unless you're like a total jerk, which I don't think there's anyone on this call who would fall into that category. But I genuinely believe people are good people. They want to be
goodish people, like you said.
goodish people. But we're afraid of the unknown. We're afraid of difference. And that leads us into this us versus them mentality, or just, and not wanting to make these connections across difference. And so that fear of difference, we can overcome it, by leaning on our strengths and doing exactly what you're talking about. I love that. I want to share so obviously Damola put a lot more time and energy and creativity into his superhero, just don't worry. But here's my superhero.
I love it though.
And make your own superhero. I strongly recommend doing it. And so this is my superhero. I haven't named her yet. Something like Dr. V, but like cooler. I need to come up with a cooler name. But she has 3 primary superpowers. So the first is having that connection and compassion across difference. So, really creating these meaningful connections with others, and bringing out the best in people as a result. So that's the first. The second and third are kind of combined, but it's taking these abstract concepts and turning them into things that we can actually measure and identify, and using that data, using that science and research to enhance outcomes that make the world a better place for humans. So here's my superhero. And I just gotta say, doing this exercise, doing this activity and thinking about, what are my strengths? My villain, is ending all the isms, right? The sexisms, the racisms, ageisms, the homophobia, all these isms that come from this fear of difference, and creates these cultures of toxicity and hate. How can I use my superpowers to overcome these fear of difference that we have in the workplace? And so I love this exercise. I can't recommend it enough. Create superheroes for yourself, on your team. I thought it was such a great exercise to kind of have a little fun with these concepts that are really heavy, that are still so important, but we can have some fun with it as well. So that being said, I would be doing a disservice if I didn't talk a little bit about what Damola and I have been building and working on, and share that with the group today. So our secret weapon is disrupting DEI corporate training. So I do a lot of these trainings. I've studied them, I research them, I build them. And something that is consistent, unless you have a phenomenal speaker or facilitator, they can be kind of dry. And so Damola and I have been working on building a new disruptive product in the DEI space that really capitalizes on the idea of using creative storytelling to unleash inclusion as our superpower. It's a team-based DEI training program. It's a 6-week curriculum. It's intended for superhero teams of around 4 to 5. And you learn inclusion concepts and DEI concepts using things like creative storytelling, guided self-discovery, product design and teamwork. And then I think the most beautiful output and deliverable of this program are the media assets that these teams can create. So depending on what makes most sense for your teams, for your organization, you could have mini podcasts, or actually creating a superhero like the ones you just saw Damola and I share, or building a comic book. But as I said, this is very disruptive, and I come from a very strong science background. So I wanted Damola to talk a little bit about what this could look like, because he's definitely the creative behind this mastermind.
Yes. So what we've been doing, and is that if you come with the concept of superhero rap, so we actually are allowing people to reconstruct that song, Stop the Bullying, but telling your own superhero story. Right? So you can now see, okay, well, here's the story of the deity die. You get the lyrics that I wrote to the Stop the Bullying song. And that sets the context of, okay, he's talking about it doesn't matter your religion. It doesn't matter who you love. It doesn't matter your background. It doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter what you love to do. Here's all these cool things. Now and then a lot of you have said, what is it that makes you different? Now that's your identity, right? So now you could identify with yourself. See, one thing about inclusion doesn't take away your identity. It brings your identity to create your own character. So now you start forming, well, who am I? What's your origin, right? And that's your story. Then now, what is your superpower? what is it? What is this talent? What is this gift you wish you had? Right? And then what is the obstacle you face every day? So your gift helps you attack this obstacle that you want to overcome, right? And then you are who you are, so that's your identity, right? So you have your idealism, you're using this talent, that's your science fiction, and then the villain is what are you going to overcome? And then you're telling your story. How did you get here, right? And then you're working in teams where people are collaborating. So everybody does each part of it. But on different weeks, a different person is the project manager. So it's also an alternative management style. So everybody gets a chance to be in each other's shoes. So one week you might be the project. So you pick where you're a specialist in, but then now you're having somebody else guide you. So, okay, well, I know I'm good in speaking. But, oh, I might not be good with the art and the drawing. Well, I'll help you with that. But now I have to learn from you. So the teacher and the learner exchange roles in how you're creating it. But then the ultimate product is collaborative. So now everybody can see like, oh, I get a tendency to think like it should be this way because I'm good at this. But now I feel how people feel when they don't know. So it actually enhances how I'm able to train people. So how does that work? So if you are a scrum manager and it's like, well, how do I help people make their stories fit into our epic, right? So it's like, how do I now help people like, okay, this person is lagging in this language. How do I now help them do it? Well, I didn't understand the dynamics of how they were learning because I couldn't get in their shoes. But in something that's creative, that's cultural, that everybody is sharing, where everybody's collaborative, everybody's bonding, you're able to now see each other in different positions. So you get soft skills like teamwork, and then you get hard skills like technical things, and then you get collaborative organizational management, which Victoria is a mastering of. Here is everybody's position, and here's how you bring the best out of people, because if I know your story, I could empathize with you and I could function better with you because I've humanized you. And if you're struggling and something is bad, I already have a perspective of what you're going through so you don't feel isolated in our organization.
I love it. I know we're about at time. I did want to share if this type of program would be something that'd be interesting, or you think if you're doing DEI work, or you know your company's doing DEI work and they want to take a more innovative and creative approach to learning about these concepts, building these more DEI driven teams, please reach out to us. That's Damola's email address, my email address. This is a brand new product, so we're testing it out, we're trying it out, but we're really excited. Especially we're both based here in Pittsburgh, just to start working with some Pittsburgh-based tech firms in this DEI, and who want to promote DEI in a really innovative and creative way. Please reach out to us. But it's been an honor to have this conversation. And
if you're anywhere around the world, around the country, as you see, we'll travel. We could do virtual. We could do anything.
Well, that's a beauty about this too, especially with the podcast deliverable. This work can be done virtually. Everything is virtual now, and this is just another aspect of virtual work that we can make happen. So I just wanted to thank you all again for joining us. This has been a great webinar. Stay positive, keep promoting DEI in your spaces. This is how we're gonna get through this time.
And love each other. We all human beings. Let's see each other through inner sight. No need to fight. Right? So it's like we could all find commonality, right, in each other. And if we start at what can we agree on, then it's easier to deal with difficult things. And if we could find a fun way to address uncomfortable situations, then there's at least hope that we could overcome a lot of challenges. And that's all we could do, right? Do the best we can. But that's what I want to bring to everybody today.
Thank you, Damola. Thanks for doing this with me.
Well, thank you, Victoria. This is so fun.
Thank you all for joining. Have a wonderful day. And yeah, please reach out if you think this might be a good product at your organization. So thank you all.
Thanks to everyone.